unmute my mic. Alright, well, greetings. Actually, session number 12, guys. We've been doing this for just over a year at this point. So we should have probably...
Right. 1 a month. Ish.
Yeah, right. So congratulations, go us. I'm your DM, Crit Thulu. I'm joined by Al playing Talion Tilvande, Andy playing Gideon Blacklake, and Jules playing Azure. Michael may or may not hop on at some point, but I'm just going to give an abbreviated intro and get the ball rolling. So we've just been off the air, shooting the breeze until now. So, to recap the events of the last episode, you guys were in the Kiras, the Deep Doors, the ruins of Kor Karash, the Dakani city that Greywall was built on top of. You are far from home. You are outside of the Five Kingdoms. You are in the land of Droan, or Drome, of course, as it's known by its more monstrous inhabitants. I know I say that every time. You guys were escorting Durkala Durga, the dirge singer of the Kekvolar, and she had a map to a lost tomb of a Dakani warrior. She wanted your assistance in plundering said tomb, but for good purposes. She wanted to basically return any relics that were still left there to her people, as she is like a keeper of histories and things of that nature.
It belongs in a museum.
Yes, it belongs in a museum. It belongs in a Dakani museum, specifically. Hang on just a second. I'm trying to see. I don't know if there's a bunch of lag, if we're going to catch up. So you guys encountered some Ankegs burrowing through the deep doors. You saw some relics of a bygone era, and in the tomb of Jorb, this lost warrior, you encountered several Dolgrim, the multi-armed, two-mouthed, mutated goblinoid creatures formed by the Dalekir, and you also encountered a Dolgaunt, a mutated and bloated, tentacle-bearing creature. But you've survived both of those encounters, and you are... The moment that we actually left off on, Talion, you had been seized by the tentacles, turned upside down, several loose items kind of shaken out of your pocket, maybe a few coins of yours. But when the Dolgaunt died and released you, you splattered to the floor pretty unceremoniously. And from the corpse of the Dolgrim nearest you, there were two thin layers of gray skin in the shape of hands crawling off of its unconscious and dead form in your general direction. So we rejoin you all now in the moment after the battle. The smell of burning ozone and your various wounds, and these gloves of living skin slowly inching towards the gnomish companion. The rest of you don't immediately see this because he was kind of up on a ledge, and the rest of you are down in a pit, basically, where the majority of the fighting took place. So Talion...
Despite my best tactical planning.
Talion, what would be your immediate reaction to this non-sensory?
Well, I'm gonna get up, obviously, and I'm gonna kind of shovel to the edge of the pit and be like, guys, somebody come tell me I'm imagining this. But I'm not gonna get too close to these things.
Okay. Even in that moment, as you kind of push yourself up off the ground, as if sensing that you're getting further away, they kind of inch to a halt and just lay inert there in the dirt. But Durkala Durga kind of hears you call out, and she kind of she just kind of begins looking around. Sorry, is anybody else going to try to tend to Talion? I would say a ghost is usually a pretty curious sort, so he's probably trying to scramble up the northern wall now to see what's going on.
If there's any distress in your voice, I'd know. Yeah.
My first instinct is to shoot it with lightning, but that's my first instinct for a lot of things, so...
I wouldn't say distress so much as like I
You?
really, really hurt. So it's kind of like
Oh,
Yeah, so you
aren't
also...
you the medic?
I am the medic.
Yeah, I think Dirkala expended most of her spells for the day, kind of in the battle. But yeah, as you all kind of, those of you who are interested parties, scramble up the wall, just taking account basically of there were several objects of interest that kind of became apparent here in the aftermath of the battle. These gloves, they do appear to be gloves. I would say Azure, you had a 20 on your Arcana check coming in here, and you picked up the influence of, and this is maybe one of the mistakes I made in the canon of Eberron. I think I called these creature Dalekier, but I think Dalekier are more like the demon princes of this particular like plane of madness. These creatures are just aberrations that were like made by them. These are like their foot soldiers. I don't think you call these Dalekier or whatever. But that being said, you know that there was some planar influence here, which accounted for like strange mossy formations and like spirals and like the weird shape of the stone stalactites in this room and things of that nature. Rolling over that 20 from your Arcana, I'm going to just go ahead and make one more Arcana check, but the DC is a bit lower because you're in the mindset, I would say.
22.
Okay, hang on one
Not
second.
natural.
Damn, Skippy.
I know my Arcana. Brontosaurus dice are awesome. What? My spoils of origin.
I'm sorry, what was the total? What did you get on that? Wow, 22. Okay. You know specifically what these are. You know that these creatures were shaped by an entity, like a lot of these aberrations that you encounter after the war and like the ancient history when the plane of Zoriat and like the Dalekier leading all these aberrations fought with the Dakani long, long ago. And they were all banished to Khyber or whatever. You know that like one of them was like known as like a flesh weaver or something, and he's the one that created all of these aberrations. But you know that like the arcane manipulation of flesh and bone and sinew is common to Zoriat and its denizens. Specifically, you would know that this, as Talia describes that they were kind of moving, this set of gloves, are gloves, but they are living gloves. You can see that they're made of just kind of like a faintly gray flesh, largely inert at this moment, but you think that by putting it on and allowing whoever dons them and allows themselves to bond with them, essentially, you would know that like it's like a symbiotic relationship that would be established, and that's not uncommon for these foot soldiers of the Dalekier to be equipped with these symbionts, basically, that bolster their abilities. And hang on just a second. Let me...
To give yourself over to these things? Like, would they suddenly take control? Like, are we talking like Venom type symbiote, or are we talking like
What's the positive? What's the negative?
Blue Beetle symbiote?
So
That might be worse.
Is it?
I am...
'Cause
you know that once bonded, it becomes difficult to remove, but you don't think that they exert any extraneous influence on the wearer. I just dropped in our Twitter chat and in our Zoom chat a link to a Google Doc. This would be describing the living gloves. And with a high enough Arcana check, you can identify those. But essentially, I will recap here that the living gloves do require attunement, and once they are attuned, as I said, it becomes difficult to take them off. You actually cannot unattune to them, I believe, until a remove curse is cast upon you. Let me know if you guys can open that document, because it's all of a sudden throwing me a fit. And I thought I made that shareable. There we go. Symbiotic gloves made of thin chitin and sinew pulse with life of their own. To attune to this item, you must wear them for the entire attunement period, during which they bond with your skin. While attuned to these gloves, you can gain one of the following proficiencies, your choice when you attune to the gloves: sleight of hand, thieves' tools, one kind of artisan's tools of your choice, one kind of musical instrument of your choice. And when you make an ability check using the chosen proficiency, you add double your proficiency bonus to the check instead of your normal proficiency bonus. They cannot be removed from you while you're attuned to them, and you can't voluntarily end your attunement to them. If you're targeted by a spell that ends a curse, your attunement to the gloves ends and they can be removed. So, there's some other items described on there that I'll review here in a second.
Play the fiddle. No.
You know, my countrymen often get accused of, oh, they're raising the dead, such an abomination. Man, they don't have anything on this.
No, it's pretty gross.
This is cows.
There are better ways to break into someone's house with skin gloves. Living
Zero
skin
interest.
I'm assuming that you've told us all what they are, though, right?
Yeah, I relay all this
Italian's
stuff like.
Italian's kind of staring at him now, like a little interested.
Do you, dude? Nope. That's a hard no from me.
So, aside from those gloves, which you can handle without, they don't like immediately force themselves onto your hand and begin the bonding process. You can see after this moment of kind of kinetic energy that they seem to still have, they come to a halt and lay there pretty inert. Out of the like various folds of skin of the Dolgaunt creature, you can see that it seems to have amassed most of the wealth. So in its death, some of these pockets were kind of turned out essentially. But you find the equivalent of let's see here, something to the tune of, and you guys don't have to, I'll give you the breakdown here in a second, but 10 platinum pieces, 36 gold pieces, and 24 silver pieces. All of that totaling up to about 136 gold pieces worth of coin. If you guys wanted to divide that up right now, that would be 34 gold, 6 silver for each of you. You see in a small pouch a polished orb. Just because of your 2 successful planar knowledge checks, I would say you know that this is a Zoriat marble. That's the orb of shielding that's described in the document I just shared with you. I'll review that here in a second. And you would see a potion of healing common. You will recognize these like light pink as soon as you kind of uncap the steel vial that it's held in. The scent of peppermint and just the light pink nature of it, you would know these anywhere at this point. The only thing that Durga seems keenly interested in as you guys are kind of gathering up these items, the coffin that the Dolgaunt was kind of lording over is like a bronze turned green with age, I would say, carving depicting a hobgoblin warrior kind of in repose, and laid across its form, holding it, is a long sword made of like a grayish metal. That I would also say Azure, you're familiar with as Bayeshk, basically. A somewhat rare mineral that's kind of a primary export of Drome. There are mountains, the Grey Wall Mountains, I believe. You guys talked with some Dwarven prospectors in the caravan that you were traveling here. They were looking for Bayeshk. But Durga lays claim to that as a relic of her people. She says that everything else is trivial to her. So that orb of shielding, you all are, I'm assuming, taking a look at that. It just gives you resistance to psychic damage when you're attuned to it. You can also see, like, in the same pouch that contained it, some small chips of a similar material, and like some like granular powder of kind of the same material. Let's just see. A ghost with an investigation check would kind of piece together that this might have been what they were mining for. Just some sort of mineral from, like, maybe related to the Kyber Dragon shards or related to Zoriat or something. But yeah. Durga would actually go on to explain that the daughters of Sora Kel found their mayor of Greywall in a cell not too dissimilar to this one under the city. Bands like this, the Delkir foot soldiers, these aberrations, roam these halls. But to that end, as I had told you in the Twilight Palace, there is a bounty to be collected for them. She kind of gestures broadly at all the corpses strewn about the room. She says if you collect their teeth, there are interested parties on the surface who would trade you coin in exchange.
Hand axe and start
Magazine.
crying.
Okay. So you collect up those teeth. Part of Durga's invitation for you all to join her on this expedition, or rather her, I guess, request for you to join her on this expedition, she said that she would forego any interest in coin and gems and things like that, just for the relics of her people. So I'm guessing nobody wants to argue a claim to this longsword, unless you all want to.
It's too big for me.
Knowing that, ooh, made of shiny material. I'm being respectful of the
Okay.
goblinoid peoples. So it's a relic. Yes, it's awesome. Probably magic weapon, whatever. That's theirs.
Okay.
As everybody's talking about that, kind of getting used to it, I'm going to go ahead and pocket those gloves.
Pocket them. All right. They feel
All
strangely,
yours, dude. All yours.
strangely warm in your pocket at first, and then they grow colder. Good to know. All right. Well, yeah, and then the third thing described on that, Jules, since you don't have Twitter, I don't really have a way to message you, but this was something I had suggested to Andy as, if you remember, when you did your service for the Morgrave University, you were promised either a sack of coins or magic items. And I just think this was something that you might be interested in. It's obviously a dangerous item. I made a whole description about how they only handed it to you when you were boarding the train to leave the city, specifically. And they,
Why?
well, they said that
Explosion rocks lightning rail.
they said that the crafting of this was registered with the Blackened Book, and that if an item like this was used in a crime in Sharn, that you would be a person of interest, basically. But they handed
Give me
you
a weapon
like
of mass destruction.
yeah, basically a very
Kinda
light
did.
WMD. So in theory, I mean, if you wanted to take that, that would be your item from the.
No, that's gonna blow up like the first time.
Oh, I know.
I-
I know. I expect this to go.
I thought it was
Spectacular.
similar. So this is the 5e Horn of Blasting, and I thought it was similar to all the other 5e. Like, if you roll a 1 on a d20, like, it explodes. But this is actually a 20% chance of explosion when using, so I'm like, alright, well, that's plenty fun. The advantage to this being, you kind of requested from the artificers that it fit your theme of thunder and lightning. So you would at least be resistant to that lightning damage if if and when it
That's
does fail.
good.
Yeah.
Point standing.
All of you all are screwed, but I'm good. We're
Yeah.
good.
No, it's 10d6, right?
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Hey.
So yes, the horn of thundering
See
instead
if
of the
it
horn of
works.
blasting, but still.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well then, yeah. So from all the loose coinage here, like I said, you get the equivalent of 34 gold, 6 silver each. You chip out the teeth. Each of the Dolgrim has 2 mouths. Some of the teeth probably were damaged in the fight, but you still get several handfuls. The Dolgaunt had 1 mouth, but yeah, just released from its tentacle suckers and things. You find all these loose coins and this potion of healing and all of that. So is anybody laying claim to the orb of shielding or the potion of healing at the moment, or? I'm just curious for my own.
As our little resident half-ass healer, I'll take hold of that potion.
Fate needed.
Yeah, it is.
The only issue with that is the
Can't get
orb.
focused.
Yeah, you're because
Mhm.
that one gives you all the
Yeah.
crazy lightning bonus.
Yeah.
Are you at
Do
the
you
point?
even
Do you really have that many attunements already? Because you can be attuned to
So
3
she
items.
has the
I have just the one.
Yeah. Okay.
It's +1 to any damage with lightning.
I don't know what a ghost uses for an implement, but it sounds like that's a universal one.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That'd be a good one for. For a
We can
ghost.
just leave that in party treasure and debate it at a future date. That's fine. You can always try and fence it too, but it's from the plane of madness, so it might take a certain kind of buyer. So that being said, you guys can gather all of this up, harvest the teeth from these individuals. You could also probably take the equivalent of a short rest. I mean, from the moment these creatures were slain, the kind of extra planar tingling that you were feeling, Azure, is abated. So it's a pretty restful area, I would say. So you guys could take a short rest and spend any hit dice. Talion, if you want to perform a song or a story of rest, you can bolster everybody with a d6.
Well, let's do that.
1, 2.
So whatever
It's
hit
a very
dice.
soft. It's a very soft song because I'm super tired. So.
Yeah, so anybody can, if you roll a hit dice, you can roll an extra d6 and throw a few more hit points on there.
Ooh, awesome.
This is what we're
14. I'm almost back to full.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! I am not. Thanks so much.
Is it a short rest thing or a long rest thing?
So, following the trail through the deep doors that you all took to get here, well, actually, let's say during the short rest as well, Dirkhalid takes a moment to kind of speak with you all, and she kind of looks to Gideon as the one who has the martial prowess in the group, probably the one who's commanded her respect the most. But she says, "You have honored the traditions of my people, and you have fought well. I will do my best to speak with those on my network and point you in the correct direction. The Fangs, I believe, are at the heart of this conspiracy, pulling the strings and manipulating the dreams of my kin to further fan the flames of hostility between Drome and the Five Nations. We cannot allow this to continue."
Cool. So what can we do to help?
Well, you complete your long rest. Andy, your mic is doing that thing where it made you real quiet if you said something.
I said I'm really desperately tempted to make a terrible joke right there and have held my tongue.
Interesting. All right. You guys are able to retrace your steps through the deep doors. You pass back by the ant cakes that you had slain. You were told by Durga as well that there was a price to be had for their mandibles. And you also, I think, had designs on harvesting some of the larger pieces of chitin to see if they'd be worth.
If my notes are correct, we 2 sets of mandibles and then a full carcass, effectively.
Yeah, yeah. I just think I thought the plan was to get that on your way out. So whether
It exactly was.
I drag that with us the whole time.
So it looks like it's only been maybe a couple of hours at this point since you passed through. It doesn't look like anything has kind of set upon these creatures in the interim. So you set about some more grim work. The mandibles, easy enough to harvest. Between the 2 creatures that you have left there, you get several large plates and a few smaller ones that you think would be useful to an armorer, perhaps. But gathering that loot and pushing your way back towards the surface of Greywall, you guys emerge not too far from the Twilight Palace, still here in the Calabas, the kennels, the safe, touristy, if there could be any area of this town that is touristy, district nearest the gate to Greywall, basically. Just laden with all kinds of large pieces of ancake plate and sacks probably dripping with aberration and insectoid blood and things like that. But if in the midday hustle and bustle here, nobody seems to pay you much mind. Essentially, you went down into the deep doors from when you passed through here in the morning, I would say there was nobody. It was kind of just like an abandoned little stone edifice building. Here towards the midday, you can see that there are individuals kind of taking midday meals here. It looks like people have gotten, and by people, of course, I mean goblinoids, your bugbears and goblins and such, are taking takeout from the nearby grist mill. So you can just, as you draw near the surface, just smell that sickening stench of whatever this rotting meat is. And they all kind of look at you and then just look back to their meals and mutter to themselves and goblin. But with Durga's lead, actually, by the time you reach the surface, Durga, she's kind of she rolled up the longsword and tucked it into her backpack. It didn't really come with a scabbard. She says that she will take her leave and speak with her contacts as far as they reach here. She will contact you again at the Twilight Palace in a few hours.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So she takes her leave of you, striding off further into the city where she might be more welcome than you are. But yeah, you are on the surface of Greywall, and you have at least a few hours to accomplish whatever you intend to accomplish here.
Collect the bounties and ideally look for someone to purchase a whole pile of hound cake.
So, in the Roar, since it's here midday, early afternoon, you could see it's a large sprawling plaza. Again, you have kind of the air traffic of harpies and gargoyles passing by, and you pass several ogres pulling carts and trolls kind of lumbering about, wearing the badges kind of depicting the crest of the city, and just all manner in every direction you look of the more monstrous humanoid races. But in the Roar, in the shadow of the statue of the dragon that is there, the representation of House Tharash's power in this area, you could see that there is a short line in front of a cart where there are 2 goblins, and the line is a procession of individuals holding bloody sacks or with teeth and tusks and things of that nature in hand, and they seem to be exchanging the items that they have to these two goblins, who are just kind of looking at them over, making notes on some parchment, handing out coin, and then just hucking them onto this cart. This seems to be the tooth and maul trade that you've heard so
The
much
tooth
about.
fairies.
Yeah.
They were goblins all along.
I knew it.
Yeah. On some of the larger teeth.
Yeah,
It's accurate.
let's get in line.
On some of the larger teeth, as you kind of observe their activity, they do take a moment to etch some simple runes in, seemingly cataloging the creatures that these are reported to come from. In front of you, there's goblins and kobolds. Some of them seem to have teeth that come from creatures like no larger than big rats. Some of them have like rat tails and things of that nature too, as if for further evidence of their claims. But after a short wait in line, by the time you guys reach the front of the line, the two goblins there are looking at you kind of quizzically. This seems to be like a brisk trade in the city, but it's not something you don't think that outsiders do too often. And you guys all tend to stick out like sore thumbs. You're all strange creatures to them. But you hand over the sets of mandibles, the Dolgrim teeth, the Dolgaunt teeth. For the mandibles, those just kind of get hastily hucked into the cart, and one goblin, kind of calls to the other as he scribbles down some things on the parchment. The Dolgrim teeth, you can see that they do make a small mark on each, and they're counting them up, making tallies on the paper and arguing back and forth amongst themselves in Goblin. By the time all of this is said and done, I'll just lump in as well that you do find you're handed a sack of coin for this, and you head off in search of somewhere to pawn off these pieces of ancake plate. You find
I'll straight up ask them if they know like someone who buys this type of thing specifically.
They look back and forth, kind of exchange some rapid fire goblin speech, and then one of them just kind of points just over the horizon to a small stream of smoke coming up from beyond like the nearest buildings to you on the other side of the roar, and then they kind of thrust out the coin in that area, or they thrust out the sack of coin to you and just wave you off. So trailing that smoke down to its source, you can see. You also, as you kind of round this corner, you are able to follow your nose as you get that kind of like sulfuric sense of like a tannery or something along those lines, a leather worker. But you follow your nose in that trail of smoke to a semi-outdoor operation. You could see the hides of several animals kind of stretched out on racks, and buckets of chemicals and things of that nature just kind of sprawling out of a squat little hovel. But there is a hobgoblin there who is seated and dunking, wearing two like heavy leather gloves and dunking something into a bucket of rather unsavory looking solvent or something. But he kind of stands up seeing you all approach and just kind of throws his gloves on the ground. I would assume some of these pieces are so large that you probably didn't even fit them in a backpack, so I think it's pretty immediate.
No, they're probably like draped all over, like carrying some, and yeah.
Sandcake, he says.
Interested?
He gives a nod. So he offers you 50 gold pieces for the hide, or if you'd prefer, he goes on to say, I can take that. It'll take maybe a week or so of work. I can make you a set of hide armor. Slightly resistant to the acid and things of that nature. And he kind of takes one of the chitin plates and just like dunks it in the bucket that he was working in and holds it up to you, and you can see it just kind of like beads and runs off.
I don't really have any use for hide armor.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in this group particularly does.
Maybe Alan? I don't know what type of armor you have.
I think a bard gets proficiency in light. I think hide is technically
I think
medium.
it would be. It sounds like it would be too heavy for me, really. That's my gut instinct, is that as a little thing. As a little gnome.
Yeah, hide armor is
This will be a
12
bit
plus
more.
your dex modifier, maximum 2. So if your dex is higher than 14, it's probably not a great trade-off anyway, but...
My dex is higher than 14, so... Yeah, I'm good. But I like to think that as we get close to this tannery and smell, noise and everything, that I feel these living gloves kind of wiggle for a second in my pocket. Like they're nervous, They don't want to be... don't want to be not living gloves anymore.
So when are you just debating putting them on, or are you just like
No,
waiting
I'm
for
gonna put 'em
private?
on. I'm just
Okay.
waiting for the right
It's gonna be an
time.
overnight thing.
Absolutely.
Your hand in 2 bowls of warm water with living gloves on. All right.
In fact, I may try and find a place that sells makeup so I can like maybe match my skin tone so that people don't know that I've put them on.
Yeah. I was thinking about. I was wondering if you were gonna put non-living gloves over your living gloves. But
Double glove. Yeah, I think that would end up
gloves?
being
no,
a disadvantage on my.
it's turning into the OJ trial, though. All right. So between the teeth and the hide, you guys get a total of what is it? 5 gold pieces per each mandible, 50 gold for the hide, 10 gold for the Dolgaunt teeth, 40 gold for the Dolgrim teeth. There were more of those guys. So all in all, total, with the 4-way split, you get the equivalent of 27 gold, 5 silver. So you guys are just raking all of that cash in. I don't even know what you would use it for. But you can see the coins that they give you are battered, and they have the mint marks kind of from all over the 5 kingdoms. And that being said, you guys have paid for drinks at the Twilight Palace and things of that nature, and you've paid for lodging and stuff there. You haven't seen any coins with like a Drome mint mark. It seems like they get a lot of foreign currency kind of exchanging hands. But even in the markets that you guys have passed through briefly, you've seen people bartering more so than even trading in coin. I mean, here in the Calabas, you would imagine the coin flows a bit more. But in some regions, you think with these teeth mongers, and maybe even like there's a kobold behind you who you can see exchanges coin for the teeth, basically. You can just see that it's handing over large sacks of copper and getting some coin or some teeth from the cart. So yeah, strange economy here, strange land. But yeah, browsing through all of that, you guys are still in the Calabas, the one section of town where you have been told that you're the safest. But other than that, is there anything else you guys want to accomplish before returning to the Twilight Palace? I think a ghost is there reading a book.
Wine.
A bath is good. Yeah.
I'm trying to keep my
Bath
eye open
shower.
and see if I see something that looks like a makeup stand.
Okay. A makeup stand in this this town. Let me think of what you would find here.
I don't think I would find one. That's why I'm thinking. I think I'm just looking at this point.
Go ahead and make an investigation check for me.
Yeah, that's an 11.
Okay, so it's hard to navigate the mercantile that's in this area, just because like none of the shops have names written in common. Like you see a lot of like pictures, basically like crude drawings and stuff that kind of depict what these businesses are. So kind of leaving from the tannery and heading back to the Twilight Palace, you see some shops. You think like you're like, I don't even know what that's supposed to, is that a bear? Like, I don't know. Like, some of these drawings are just so, elementary or whatever. But by the time you get back to the Twilight Palace, you do not see anything like that. I will say, though, because you're a bard, the Twilight Palace is a joint venture by two of the houses of the 12. It's House Galanda, your hospitality house, who runs like the Gold Dragon Inn. And it's also House Fjarlin, which is these are the performers. You guys had seen a lot of musicians performing here, but I would say you had also seen like you've seen like a one-man play, like a one-man reenactment of the Boronil Irwinarn story, basically. And you remember that guy had some pretty thick stage makeup on. So it's possible, like in the back here, where the performers gather, you might be able to find some makeup there.
I'm totally going to try and find him. Yeah, I'm definitely going to try and find this guy.
Okay. Interesting. You saw him perform last night. That's your first and only night so far in the Twilight Palace. So you don't know if he's, he might be booked again for another evening slot. I mean, he might be doing like a late afternoon supper show. But the question is to get access to the back, to the House Fjarlin. Why can't I think of a word for backstage? There we go. Are you trying to sneak in, or are you just gonna talk your way in?
I'm gonna try and talk my way in.
Okay,
yeah.
Sure. So there are performers here, even in the late afternoon. You see jugglers, just plying their juggling trade. But I mean, just the general flow of traffic and the jugglers on the various stages and their assistants coming out and things, and people setting up for the next shows. You find your way towards the back. There is a guard standing there in the Fjarlin livery. Oh man, I cannot remember what Fjarlin's symbol or colors are at the moment, but just imagine a guy. He looks pretty bored. He's got a rapier sheathed at his side, dressed a little bit extravagantly, with a Hydra crest kind of emblazoned on his leathers. But it's like the midday, and the performers are just kind of bustling back and forth. You see like some line girls coming out to get ready for an evening's performance. He looks at you, but he's also sipping from a tankard. But he just knows you're not one of the performers here, so he kind of gives you a look and raises an eyebrow as if like, what are you doing here?
So I'm gonna approach him and talk about how I'm just a huge fan of the show that I've seen, and I'm just a humble bard. I travel from place to place. But these are professionals, and they're so impressive. And I just was hoping that maybe I can meet one or two, and I'm gonna try and slip him a couple of pieces of silver to sweeten the deal.
All right. I think with the bribe, that takes this out of the deception neighborhood and puts it in the persuasion neighborhood. So go ahead and give me a persuasion check.
That is what I wanted it to be. Thank you. 21.
Perfect. Wow. He takes a deep drink. He takes the coins from you and just kind of slips them in a pocket. He hasn't said anything to you this whole time, but he just takes a deep drink and just kind of gestures his head as if like, go along. You don't look threatening to him. So once you're backstage, there's so much bustling around back here. the various performers coming in and getting ready for the evening and things like that, that you go pretty much unnoticed, which is typical for a gnomish individual. So you can suss your way around. You do eventually find like some a dressing room where there's several vanities set up that nobody is currently using, and you see all the tools of that trade that you might be interested in just kind of scattered about these benches.
They're just out for the taking.
I mean, essentially.
Well, I'm gonna see. I mean, I'm just kind of looking around, and I'm assuming that there's different types of makeup, and I'm looking for something that clearly will stick, but also that looks natural, and if it can match my skin color, the closer it gets to my skin color, the better. I'm just kind of looking around, see if I find anything that looks like that.
Okay, just go ahead and make an investigation check for me.
But that seems like a hard thing to find. That's a very specific thing, and that's a 9.
So you scoop up a few things that you think might be relevant. You hold your breath for a moment as some performers rush by. You hear like the clanging of cymbals as like a one-man band guy just bustles by you with the cymbals between his knees, kind of clanging together. So you hold your breath, but nobody kind of forces the issue. I think the gnomes of Zalargo range in skin tones from like pasty. Those who spend a lot of time in the library at Cornenberg, tend towards the more scholarly pasty type. But I imagine there's also a lot of like tanned individuals. Zalargo's got a lot of coast, and Trollenport is basically waterside and things like that. So I don't know if you're more tan or more alabaster or whatever. But with a 9 and your kind of knowledge of cosmetics, you scoop together some things you think might work. A couple of brushes and like some powders and things. But I don't think you really 100% know what you're doing.
I don't. But I've been, Gideon's been such a good influence on me that as I'm picking these up, like let's say I pick up 6 or 7 things, right? And as I'm picking them up, I'm dropping copper pieces. I'm buying these things. They just don't realize that I'm buying them. So everywhere that I pick up something, I drop a copper piece.
Perfect. Well, so you're able to accomplish all that. You sidle on out past that guard. He doesn't give you any thought. But
Our cat.
But the rest of you, you're all able to get a bath or whatever. I would say essentially the money. So it is now Nim the 24th. So like I think Nim is like the equivalent to like March. You guys started your adventures on Nim the 2nd. So you guys have really only been traveling together for about 3 weeks, but you've come a long way in those 3 weeks. From Cornberg to Sharn by the Lightning Rail, from Sharn to Rote to Gallespire to all the way out to the end of Breland and into Droam and things like that. And you spent like I said, 10 days on the road with the caravan. So you got some coin in exchange for that, but you're probably blowing through all of that coin here at the Twilight Palace because it is a little extravagant. Even more extravagant than the Gold Dragon Inn that you guys had stayed in Sharn for that time. So you're able to get baths or drinks and food, and you're able to kind of pass that time waiting for Durga to kind of find you in the common rooms. So anybody else have anything to do in that period?
Clean the armor. Make myself presentable tonight.
Yeah.
Sure. So you find yourselves down in the Twilight Palace common room in the evening, and Durga does come in. she tells you in brief that using her network, speaking with her sisters among the dirge singers, that she has a lead for you. She says the daughters of Sorakel, the trio, the coven of hags that rule over these lands, if they called it taxation, they would face a lot of pushback. Many of these individuals who make up their kingdom are the greedy type, or perhaps not clever enough to understand what taxation means. But tribute is a concept that they do understand. So all trade that occurs within the city, a portion of tribute is passed along to the daughters in exchange for their protection and for the betterment of Drone. That being said, there are, of course, merchants in this town who seek to cheat the daughters of their fair share. And of these, only one would perhaps be foolish enough to deal with a terrorist organization. In Little Greywall, Trollgut Alley. It's behind one of the grist mills there. There's an ogre seated there this evening and every evening, as far as my contacts know. Go to him and tell him that you are looking for Big Deal. Big Deal.
Big deal.
Assuming self-named.
What did you say?
I'm assuming self-named.
She shrugs her shoulders. I'm just glad that it's easy enough to pronounce. The mayor of this town is named Zorchilik, after all. I prefer to call him Squidface. So, the question to you all is, are you going to go to Trollgut Alley and meet with this ogre tonight? Or are you going to pass an evening and head out tomorrow?
Might as well.
Yeah.
The night is young.
Yeah, we don't need a long rest or anything. Let's just do it.
Sure thing. Parting words of wisdom from Durga. She says, you do best to keep a low profile when you tread outside the calabash.
Kind of hard for me.
Actually, it might be easiest for you.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not used to that.
You might be fairly popular among some of the denizens of Little Greywall. So, departing from the Twilight Palace, how should we do this? Let's say for the sake of simplicity, a ghost will tag along, just in case we hit a cliffhanger. It'll be easy enough to write him back in. But you all depart and you head to the southwest. From the kennels, the calabash, where you all are, the district of the city known as Little Greywall, immediately becomes apparent why it is named so. Alan, all of these buildings, which is to say Talion, all of these buildings are of a scale similar to the gnomish districts that you are familiar with in the cities you're from. Which is to say that, a lot of Zalargo, they cater towards the medium-sized individuals just because they're part of the Five Kingdoms. They get a lot of Brelish folks. But there are some neighborhoods, I'd say a lot of neighborhoods in Korenberg and Trollenport and all of the cities of the Zill that are small by Gideon's standard. But you entering into Little Greywall, you see that it is named such because there are a large population of goblins and kobolds moving about the streets, heading from residence to residence, from from turning out from their bars and having an evening's festivities. But essentially, Gideon, you're a fairly tall individual. you can see over the roofs of many of these buildings, so you could see for several streets in any direction. But you can see just like whole warrens of kobolds in very tightly clustered apartment tenements, basically. And a lot of these individuals can't help but take notice of you and Azure, and even a ghost to a lesser extent, because he's of dwarven proportions. But Talion, for being not of their kin, you've kind of fit right in here. That being said, I guess some of the buildings do get a little bit taller as you approach the grist mill here. Several stories of small buildings, and this grist mill looks like it was made to accommodate all of the citizens of the district. So yeah, it itself is sized even for like a troll to fit through the door. But as you round that corner into Troll Gut Alley, assuming that it is Troll Gut Alley because there aren't any street signs or whatever, you do see an ogre seated up against kind of the stone wall at the far dead end. He's sitting there. He's eating what looks like a loaf of bread from and it looks like he's got like kind of an overflowing sack of loaves of bread kind of sitting on the ground next to him. But as he's just kind of stuffing his face, he looks up at you all as your shadows kind of darken the alleyway. But yeah, he doesn't really say anything. He just continues eating.
Not the conversational type, then. Looking for big deal.
He nods, and at this moment he stands up as an ogre, towering over some of the lower clearance buildings in this general vicinity, and he shuffles awkwardly to the side, kind of picking up his sack full of food with him. You can see he's just like this big pot-bellied creature. But as he stands up and shuffles aside, you can see that concealed by his girth, there is a large crack in the stone of the wall behind him. And you can see, just kind of like looking it over, like there are sections of this city that kind of seem like unworked stone. You think it's just part of the construction, and it's also maybe like a small comfort to some of the races that do dwell here, that it's more reminiscent of like caves and warrens and underground tunnels and such. But basically, there is a crack in the wall, large enough that Talion, you could stride through without problem. The rest of you would kind of have to bend and stoop a little to squeeze through. But as he moves aside, you can hear the sounds of a kind of screeching, warbling, shrill voice, and you can smell the smells of what would be like some sort of mixture of flavors of tobacco, and you can hear the chittering as well of just like many yipping and yapping voices, basically, kind of coming out through the dimly lit darkness within. I would also say there's a depiction just above the crack that Azure, to your eye, as somebody who has these, it looks like a dragon scale with like a little cartoon flame basically around it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
A drawing carved into the stone. A little bit of like red dye kind of mashed into the stone to illustrate the flame. But the ogre shuffles to the side and just kind of sweeps his arm towards the entrance.
Be gone.
What's the marching order going through here? I mean, Talion, you fit the easiest, but do you go first?
Yes.
All right.
Keeping a super low profile, meaning
Meaning it looks like I'm going first.
right. Yeah, exactly. In fact, hold on. Let me see. I may be super sneaky.
Azure, you have a point of order?
Name around it. Does that make me recall anything? Is that a symbol of some kind of organization? Is that?
Let me use. As you're answering that, I'm going to use my last second level spell slot and cast invisibility on myself.
Perfect. Okay. Brutal.
So
okay.
now it really does look like Gideon's number one, even though I'm in front.
So Gideon, as you turn your head and kind of like lean sideways to get through this rift, Azure, just make an intelligence check. It's not really history or anything. It's not. Okay. You've been navigating this city. You know, like as I described earlier with the shop signs and things like that. They don't really write anything in common. You seen like some scratchings that you assume is goblin and such, but it just seems like maybe a portion of the citizenry is not literate. So you think that this symbol is maybe just like the name of this establishment, but you don't draw any other significance to it, and you can't even hazard a guess. You're like, flame scales?
A dragon.
Bennigan?
Fire dragon.
Yeah. You're at a loss. Scaligans. TGI fire scales. But Ghost brings up the rear as you guys head in. So the site that you see before you, for all intents and purposes, to summarize it, I would say it appears to be a kobold nightclub. To the right, you see a female kobold performing on a stage. This was the shrill voice. Does anybody speak Draconic? Oh, I guess you would, Azure, right? Okay. So, Draconic is usually like a beautiful language, but kobolds have like a very yappy, kind of screechy tone to when they speak it. So she's
Thresher version of Draconic.
Right. So she's singing the equivalent of like a Draconic like La Mer, basically. Like it's probably like a song about like somewhere over the lava sea, you know, like. But as you guys are kind of craning in and squeezing in, you would hear the equivalent of like a Draconic record scratch as she kind of like cuts off, and you can hear like the very very tiny shatter of like a tiny glass, like smaller than a shot glass, basically, because they don't seem to get a lot of big people in here. But to the right, where that stage is, the performers have stopped at your head level. Azure and Gideon, you guys are kind of in like a very thin miasma of I can see a cat looming in. No, that's fine.
Nope.
A very thin miasma of like dark tobacco smoke and just all kinds of conflicting scents filling your nostrils, basically. Down the center, directly in front of you, there is a veritable sea of kobolds. Some of them just kind of gathered around like tables and such. Some of them just standing room only. All of them just kind of densely packed together, but nobody seeming to particularly mind. And off to the left in the far corner, and I say far, knowing that you guys could cross this whole establishment in like a move action. I mean, maybe 2 move actions, depending on if you have to plow through all these little guys. But off to the left and in the back corner, elevated as much as it can be. So like the ceiling in here for the most part is like anywhere from like 5 to 8 feet up. So you guys are kind of like Gandalf and Bag End, like stooping and getting under arches and things like that. But elevated up seems to be what you would say is like a VIP lounge, where there are several kobolds gathered just away from the general din of the crowd. And as I said, as you enter, like all eyes kind of turn to you, and silence kind of falls over the crowd for a moment.
Like open mic night.
What's that?
Like open mic night.
I mean, I think that's the thing. Gideon, make an insight check for me, and Azure, you can make one too. You can get a read of the room.
Actually good at that, believe it or
Yeah,
not.
I think at this point though, a ghost would just be like, "Hi."
21.
So Gideon, you pick up that. First of all, Talion is invisible. You saw him just fade from your sight as you were coming in behind him. So you don't think anybody took notice of him entering. But they're looking at a ghost, and they're looking at you like very confused. But the majority of kobolds that you could see that are looking at Azure, like you could see them all just kind of like leaning and whispering to one another. That's the only kind of sound you hear in the silence of the moment. And they seem to be looking at her with a lot less fear and a lot more like respect. And maybe some of them are like, "Oh my god," maybe some of them think she's beautiful, by draconic standards.
You're gonna have a bunch of horny kobolds. Yeah.
But after this moment of silence, and after a ghost says hi, basically they're greeted by the silence of the room. One of the kobolds in the VIP area reaches up and kind of snaps his claws together, and everything just resumes as if unpaused. Everybody kind of turns back to their drinks. Those nearest you are still kind of like nervously like shying away from you. You think that they particularly don't want to be stepped on, but the singer begins singing anew, and you are unbothered at the moment. What was that?
I think we found the big deal. Might as well start heading that direction.
So you are like a bull in a china shop, essentially. I mean, this would be a fire hazard by gnomish standards, certainly. The crowd of tables and just these people, but these kobolds don't seem to mind basically standing on top of one another. But as you move through, your footsteps kind of rattle some of the tables, and you can see the kobolds dispersing and then reforming as you pass. But by the time you stride over to the VIP area, I mean, like, it is like equivalent to like the second floor of a small building, which means that it probably comes up to just like a little bit above like your waist level. So you could stand here and address them. Talion, you are a short individual. Are you even 3 feet tall? Gnomes are pretty short.
Yeah, I think. I don't remember if I am 3 feet tall, actually.
Yeah. So in Gideon's wake, as he's moving and kind of dispersing these kobolds, it kind of gives you the best ability to move through the crowd as well. And
I'm just a couple inches above 3 feet. How about that? I'm tall for my age.
But I mean, you could essentially walk up and be in the VIP lounge. I mean, like there's like the equivalent of like 2 kobold guards there. You can see that they're holding what look like small, like shed dragon scales for shields, and they have tiny little spears in their hands. But you could, take one step over that red velvet rope where they're kind of standing at attention, and help yourself into the VIP if you so chose.
Oh, I already did. I already attempted to anyway.
a ghost follows behind you, Gideon, and he's saying like hi and sorry about that to some of the individuals you guys are disturbing. Azure, do you have a play, or are you sticking with the group, or?
I'm afraid of getting jumped by like 20 plus like kobolds asking for my number.
Right.
You know those crowds of the screaming girls that were outside like the Beatles concerts, like in the '60s.
I think of the D&D 4E release, like videos they did with the little kobolds and the giants. We love you. Yeah.
All right. So you tag along as well then. Let's see, Gandalf at Bag End. I'm just looking through my notes. So Big Deal, or the kobold that you assume is Big Deal, rather, the one kind of sitting at the center who snapped his fingers. He thought it was strange that you all came in here, but you could see that he thinks it's even stranger that you're seeming to approach him. So you could see he keeps his shoulders up and his chin up, and he's like staring at you, Gideon, as you approach. But like with that high insight check just kind of rolling forward, you can see him get like an inch smaller, but still keep those like proportions basically. Like he's sinking down in his chair a little bit, but he doesn't want to look like a punk in front of all of his friends here, and maybe like. Oh yeah, like there's some ladies there too. It's difficult to tell, I guess, with kobolds at a distance, but so you loom over the VIP area.
Somehow, with like no charisma whatsoever, I've somehow become the face of the party.
Yeah. Well, when I roll a 3 on insight, I mean,
I'll outright ask, listen, you're the big deal then.
He nods and he says, yes, I can help you procure whatever it is you're looking for here in Greywall. What is it?
I'm looking to do some dentistry.
You can see...
There are fangs what need pulled.
He widens his eyes and we do like the Kill Bill like zoom in like da, 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 da. All right. He's got beady eyes for certain. They kind of shift left and right, and he says I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, if you're looking for teeth off of if you're looking for teeth for bounties, there's none to be had here. Kobold teeth aren't paid for. Too tiny. And he just kind of like laughs nervously.
Oh, bigger.
All right.
Just flat, like.
All right, make your intimidation check.
This would actually be easier if it was persuasion. 15.
Bonus, I flashed my teeth.
I would say, okay, I think we might cliffhanger this because it's already 10:30. So he looks up at you. He looks around at everybody in the VIP with him. You can see that he's nervous. He waffles for a minute, you think, between I can't say anything in front of these people, I can't look weak in front of these people, but he immediately starts yapping in Draconic. Azure, as you're the only one that can understand, you can see his eyes kind of dart towards you for a moment, but he says, leave the honorable scaled one alone, get rid of the rest. And immediately as he says that, the rest of you just hear But that's greeted by a chorus of tables being flipped and chairs screeching against the stone as all of the kobolds in here begin to draw daggers and slings. And I think that's where we'll end up leaving it for tonight. Talion turning invisible there. Actually, it messed with a scripted moment I had in mind. So that was interesting. I was like, okay. We'll unpack that some other time. But yeah, we got a little bit of a late start, so I figure it's 10:30. My phone's telling me it's time to go to bed. So we will wrap it up there. We'll pick up next time. You guys are fighting in a kobold nightclub. So that'll be fun. I made up some stats for a swarm of kobolds. This is not registering on here, but that'll be a fun one. But yeah, thanks for joining us. I've been your DM tonight. I am Cthulhu at Cthulhu on Twitter, also known as Ralph. And I'm just gonna say Alien. Oh man, Talion was played by Alan at Big Al the Lawyer. Gideon was played by Andy at Blackfall Press, and Jules played Azure. Michael couldn't join us this evening, but hopefully he'll be here next time. But thanks for good game, everyone.